Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Hugging the Cactus, a Mel Gibson podcast. And today we cover another movie Mel Gibson is a bad guy in, and this one is called The Deletables 3. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean The Expendables 3. The third installment in the Expendables franchise. In this part 3, the producers in their wisdom decided to make it PG instead of X-rated. Or R-rated, or anything rated, really. And we get what we got. Now, of course, this franchise is still a runaway train. It's still extremely successful. They have a budget of 100 million and spend it well on a hugely expensive cast. And, of course, rake in about 215 million worldwide. That's a lot of money in 2015. Not so much anymore in this post-Marvel era, where if you don't make $1 billion, you're not much of a movie, apparently. Why movies have to make $1 billion, I still don't understand. Something about Wall Street, something about investments, something about anything but art. But here we are. The story of The Expendables, of course, is by Stallone. That story is really written by a guy called David Callahan. He's one of those guys who would shove his script under the doors of producers, hoping to have it read. Well, he wrote a script called The Barrow. At some point, he got screwed out of credits. He had to take him to court. During the court deposition, Stallone had to admit that he actually got the story from The Barrow, and that obviously David Callahan was the writer. Now, David Callahan is a spectacular writer because he also wrote the sequel to Zombieland, Double Tap. It failed. He also wrote the first American Godzilla. That failed. He wrote the wonderful script to Wonder Woman 1984, which failed. He also wrote Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which made money, but it wasn't as much as they'd hoped. So much for David Callahan. Then we have the script doctor, which was Creighton Rothenberger, who wrote Chosen, who wrote Olympus Has Fallen, and who wrote Angel Has Fallen. And then we have our director, Patrick Hughes. Now, Patrick Hughes, for those who don't know him, he's the guy behind The Hitman's Bodyguard and The Hitman's Wife. I actually met this guy because The Hitman's Wife was filmed in Amsterdam and I was an extra. So I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but on the other hand, Stallone doesn't pick directors who are particularly strong. The cinematography was done by Peter Menzies Jr., a competent cinematographer. You will remember him from The 13th Warrior. And he also shot Tomb Raider, the one with Angelina Jolie, and he did Shooter. Then we have the soundtrack, which is Brian Taylor. We all know and love him from the Fast and the Furious series and the last Rambo. And that's why this soundtrack sounds so Rambo-esque, if not for the fact that Stallone is in it. The producers of this film are Avi and Danny Lerner, very interesting people who make up Millennium Films. Now, they've come under some scrutiny during the hashtag #MeToo era. They're quite despicable. It's a very interesting group, and it's very interesting that Mel Gibson would work with them, considering what he's had to say about people like that in the past. But then again, oh well, never say never, I guess. Now, the cast is quite amazing. We get Stallone back, we get Schwarzenegger back, we get Mel Gibson this time, we get our Dolph Lundgren back, we get Harrison Ford this time instead of our good friend Bruce Willis, who unfortunately was already suffering from his disease, but we didn't know it yet. Stallone fired him for asking too much money, promptly hired Harrison Ford, who would work for money. Harrison Ford really loves money, as we all know from his last few movies, the ones in Star Wars and the ones in Indiana Jones, where he clearly only showed up for the paycheck without much dignity. We get Terry Crews back, which makes me very happy because I love Terry Crews. We get Antonio Banderas, we get Jet Li, and we get Wesley Snipes. Now, I'm a big Wesley Snipes fan, so that made me very happy. Unfortunately, we get some other people that we just sort of have to get used to. One of them is the addition of Ronda Rousey. Another is the addition of Glenn Powell, who will in the future star as the Hangman in the sequel to Top Gun called Maverick. And of course we get Kelsey Grammer. What the hell was Kelsey Grammer doing in The Expendables? There was a nice little cameo by Robert Davi, who I always really enjoy, who we all know from The Goonies, of course, and Raw Deal with Schwarzenegger, another pretty iconic part. And of course he's in Die Hard, but since we don't have Bruce Willis in this movie, well, that interaction was lost. Then again, in Die Hard they didn't have any scenes together either. Of course, what we really are here to talk about is Mel, who's in 6 or 7 scenes and who is a really big part of this movie. In fact, he's a big part of the Expendables, Deletables, or whatever they are. Apparently, he and Barney are the founding members of the Expendables, and we get to find that out pretty soon. Now, before we get underway, I must add that up until now, the Expendables 3 has been considered by fans to be the most boring in the franchise. The worst returns of the franchise, in fact, because all the other ones made more money. But the Expendables 4 has come along since then, and it has worked hard to change all that, and it has succeeded because the Expendables 4 is utterly forgettable. In fact, perhaps they should rename the franchise The Forgettables. Might make a nice box title. Now, of course, this movie was also a Razzie fest because the Razzies hate Stallone and they hate Mel Gibson and they hate quite a few other people. And they also sought to punish Kelsey Grammer for having the temerity to be in this movie. Kelsey Grammer, in fact, won the Razzie. Interesting. He didn't really do a bad job. He didn't do much of a good job. He was just Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer's made for TV, not movies, in my opinion. Now, as The Expendables starts, we are greeted by a Rambo-esque soundtrack. This, of course, is not an accident, but it is a welcome one. We see the Expendables shooting up a train from a helicopter. This is done with heavy CGI, which is very interesting considering the fact that Stallone always said, well, the Expendables are not a CGI fest. And in part 3, here we are. Now, the whole point of this opening action sequence a la James Bond is to free a Wesley Snipes who has been imprisoned for tax evasion. In reality, he's been in a blacklist prison as well, but that's a Hollywood prison. That's a whole different story because, of course, Wesley Snipes went to jail for real on tax evasion. That's part of the joke. Expendables 3 is really good with jokes, the dad jokes, the ones everybody already got before they came out of their mouths. You just have to sort of suffer through that because they keep doing it. Wesley Snipes keeps mentioning it even in the next scene after he's rescued as he shaves himself with Gunnar's knife. Barney explains to Christmas that he saved him because, he's an expendable, but in reality they were a man short, so they decided to get him out of prison so they could then go on to their mission. And their mission is to... It's not really sure. Are they about to assassinate someone or are they supposed to capture him? We're not really sure. Anyway, they infiltrate a harbor dock. Wesley Snipes, aka Doc, hijacks a crane, does a lot of parkour, impressing Jason Statham, who they create a little bit of an Inexpendables rivalry with because they both throw knives. While this happens, Barney spots his old partner, which is a guy called Stonebanks. He's coming out of a helicopter. And of course, the assassination attempt or capture attempt or whatever they were supposed to do fails because Barney comes out and yells his name and then starts shooting. Exactly why he is so unprofessional is really not explained, and they don't really call him on it either. Perhaps because Barney is a very unprofessional guy and they're used to it. However, they fail. It's all really sloppy. Stonebanks, up in his helicopter, is aiming at Barney and decides to wound Caesar to slow the team down, and then he drops a bomb on them. They fly off and somehow miraculously they escape the huge explosion. Luckily they freed Doc from his prison so he could help save Caesar. Very convenient. Of course, Arnold shows up and he tells Barney that he's getting out of the business, and he's warning Barney to do the same. Church is out of the picture because he was unaffordable. Harrison Ford, his replacement, call sign Drummer, shows up. He wants Stonebanks to die just as much as Barney does. However, there's a new mission and Barney has to now capture him and deliver him to The Hague. Yes, The Hague. They repeat that name constantly, which is interesting because that's where I live. Oh, yay. But I don't think anybody can actually find that on the map. Stonebanks is in Moscow and he's buying an expensive painting. Meanwhile, Barney fires his old team for... He gets Kelsey Grammer involved, who is some sort of HR manager, I guess. Recruits some hacker dude who likes freestyle climbing and he needs a parachute when he falls. It's really hokey and CGI, and it's played by Glenn Powell, aka Hangman from Maverick, as I said. An inauspicious beginning for him. It'll take him a few years to really catch his footing in Hollywood, but he's a decent leading man now at least. Then there is Antonio Banderas, also known as Felipe, a parkour guy with ADHD. Interesting addition. Next up is some dude on a motorcycle. I can't remember his name. And finally, they recruit a chick who's a bouncer in a bar called Luna, and that of course is played by Ronda Rousey. Now, as the mission starts, the old Expendables show up and they're pissed off that Barney is leaving without them. The new guy wants to know, why are they going after Stonebanks? Get ready for an exposition dump. The annoying millennial, of course, wants to know everything before he does anything because, of course, he probably needs to tweet about it or put it on his social media handles or whatever. Anyway, Barney gives him the file. It's a really big file. We all know millennials don't read. So I doubt that gave him anything, but maybe he could take some screenshots. Anyway, the old Expendables are bored out of their mind. Stonebanks is admiring a new painting again. So the buyer, who's played by Robert Davi, shows up. I'm not sure he's there to buy the painting or weapons. That's pretty unsure. But he does ask about nukes. He wants to buy nukes. And Stonebanks sort of, diplomatically says no. Which is interesting, considering the fact that he's supposed to be the bad guy. But he's actually showing some moral fiber here. Of course, this is all a trap because the new Expendables have gained entry and open fire. Because, that's what you do when you're a good guy. You shoot people. So they capture Stonebanks. Of course, Stonebanks is not intimidated in the least. In fact, he starts verbally abusing them in the very truck they are escaping in. This is an excellent scene. And this is really when we see Mel at his best. Really taking control, really commanding the screen. He brings a certain credibility and believability to the whole scene, in my opinion. Because he sounds pretty menacing, and he also sounds real because he's basically calling out Barney and saying, here I was just doing business and here you show up, paid for by the CIA to kill me. So that's pretty much the basis for the rivalry. Apparently, Stonebanks was left for dead. Most of the Expendables team was dead. And Barney left and restarted the team and forgot all about it, I guess, until part 3. Now, it all goes to shit, of course, because Stonebanks has a watch and that watch has a tracker and they're tracked by a helicopter. It blows up the truck they're all in. Somehow they all miraculously survive, of course, because this is PG rated. As they survive, Barney still goes for assault rifle to kill Stonebanks because, that's what you do. You shoot unarmed people. He's blown up by the helicopter, blown off the bridge, and manages to survive by swimming downriver. He returns, and Barney starts loading up his guns and ammo to go after Stonebanks once again. Banderas shows up, and also the old Expendables. Now, Harrison Ford calls, aka Drummer, to tell Barney that Stonebanks is in Asmenistan. Okay, well, it's a stan, and there are stans, countries ending in stan, but Asmenistan is not one of them. Anyway, much like the island of Vilena, a figment of Stallone's imagination, this is kind of a comic book movie. It's intended as a comic book movie, so you just go with it. Drummer, of course, joins Arnold and Jet Li for an off-the-books mission. Antonio Banderas' moment to shine has come, and he, of course, doesn't shut the fuck up. He just won't stop jabbering and talking and basically making an annoyance of himself. I guess that's the point of his character. It's a shame, because Banderas is so talented and so much fun and has played such cool characters. But we get this. You live with it. Anyway, the Expendables of course walk into a trap because Stonebanks has the entire Afghanistan army driving around in their T-72s. He, in a video screen, explains to the Expendables, who are now all reunited, young and old, that the entire complex they are in is rigged with plastic explosives. Now, of course, Glenn Powell, aka Thorne, is a hacker. Just like Penny in Inspector Gadget, he manages to block the signal on Gunner's wristwatch computer. So Stonebanks decides to send out the troops. And this is all what we really want: war. Now, tanks and attack helicopters move in. Barney, of course, gives a pep talk to everyone because the young'uns and the old'uns don't really get along. Enemy troops drop from the helicopters. The Expendables start killing the red shirts. Drummer shows up, kills off a few tanks. Flores Munteanu lookalike is sent by Stonebanks to do something about it. Everybody gets their little action moment. So this is really an enjoyable part of the movie. Just like the opening part, the James Bond-esque part, this is also, the grand finale, the part really where we paid our tickets for. Now, Stonebanks is not happy. He gets impatient and he complains that, they have all this equipment and all these men and they can't even wound anyone. So he shoots 2 radio operators to prove that, you can't really shoot someone. Then he gets in a truck and says something along the lines of, if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. So he gets in a truck and rams it into the building. He starts waving his Magnum around. Meanwhile, Arnold tells them, get to the chopper. Or anyway, it's the Arnold get to the chopper moment. Barney and Stonebanks, of course, face off in physical combat. And of course, Stallone wins. They both reach for guns and Barney shoots first. And Stonebanks sends something along the lines of, what about The Hague, huh? And Stallone shoots him and says, I am The Hague. Well, I'm sorry, Sly. I live in The Hague, so really I am The Hague. But, oh well. The word The Hague is bandied about a lot. Barney jumps from the building as it explodes and miraculously makes it to the rope. Then, of course, they start messing with him, saying, well, you fired us. Are we still fired? Yada, yada. And, well, he has to apologize and beg the idiots to pull him up because Barney is sorry now. Then they're back at the bar and Caesar's back amongst the living again. Drummer apparently says to Stallone, you never did get him to The Hague. The Hague again. The kids got their Expendables tattoos because, really that's why you become an Expendable. You get the tattoo. It's not about completing a successful mission and getting paid, but they get their tattoos for being live bait, I guess. Barney welcomes Galgo. That's, of course, Antonio Banderas aboard. He replaces Yang, who's working for Schwarzenegger, aka Trench. And they grin like little schoolgirls about it. And that's really the movie. And it's not really surprising that it took another 10 years for them to make another one. It's sad, but it's a fact that as soon as you start messing with the formula, the fun goes out of it. And the fun was all about seeing our old stars again, doing their thing, not being introduced to new people who really, when you look back on it, Ronda Rousey, she was a star at the time, but her star has more or less faded. Glenn Powell, at least we can cheer on a little bit. And so ends The Expendables with Mel Gibson, who did a decent job, who was a bad guy in the best sense of the word. Because, as the old saying goes, the heroes usually are one-dimensional, but the bad guy roles usually have a little meat to them. Well, you could say that much like Jean-Claude Van Damme before, Mel Gibson did a credible job providing a credible villain in this Expendables universe. So we say goodbye to Mel, literally, because he's riddled with Barney's bullets and falls back into the water. We assume he doesn't have a flak jacket on this time, allowing him to survive this slugfest. But if he does, maybe he'll be back in part 5. You never know. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.